영어하면서 읽는 고양이 제니예요. 오늘은 해리포터 2권 Chapter 18 마지막 챕터죠. Dobby's Reward 읽어보도록 할게요. 냐옹! Chapter 18 Dobby's Reward. For a moment, there was silence as Harry, Ron, Ginny, and Lockhart stood in the doorway, covered in muck and slime, and in Harry's case, blood. Then there was a scream. Ginny! It was Mrs. Weasley, who had been sitting crying in front of the fire. She leapt to her feet, closely followed by Mr. Weasley, and both of them flung themselves on the door. Harry, however, was looking past them. Professor Dumbledore was standing by the mantelpiece, beaming next to Professor McGonagall, who was taking great steadying gasps, clutching her chest. Fawkes went whooshing past Harry's ear and settled on Dumbledore's shoulder, just as Harry found himself and Ron being swept into Mrs. Weasley's tight embrace. "You saved her! You saved her! How did you do it?" "I think we'd all like to know that," said Professor McGonagall weakly. Mrs. Weasley let go of Harry, who hesitated for a moment, then walked over to the desk and laid upon it the sorting hat, the ruby-encrusted sword, and what remained of Riddle's diary. Then they started telling them everything. For nearly a quarter of an hour, he spoke in the rapt silence. He told them about hearing the disembodied voice, how Hermione had finally realized that he was holding a basilisk in the pipes, how he and Ron had followed the spiders into the forest, that Aragog had told them where the last victim of the basilisk had died, how he had guessed the moaning myrtle had been the victim, and the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets might be in her bathroom. "Very well," Professor McGonagall prompted him as he paused. "So you found out where the entrance was, breaking 100 school rules into pieces along the way, I might add. But how on earth did you all get out of there alive, Potter?" So Harry, his voice growing hoarse from all this talking, told them about Fawkes' timely arrival and about the sorting hat giving him the sword. But then he faltered. He had so far avoided mentioning Riddle's diary or Ginny. She was standing with her head against Mrs. Weasley's shoulder, and tears were still coursing silently down her cheeks. What if they expelled her? Harry thought in panic. Riddle's diary didn't work anymore. How could they prove it had been he who'd made her do it all? Instinctively, Harry looked at Dumbledore, who smiled faintly, the firelight glancing off his half-moon spectacles. "What interests me most," said Dumbledore gently, "is how Lord Voldemort managed to enchant Ginny when my sources tell me he's currently in hiding from the forest of Albania." Relief, warm, sweeping, glorious relief swept over Harry. What's that?" said Mr. Weasley in a stunned voice. "You know who? Enchant Ginny? But Ginny's not. Ginny hasn't been, has she?" "It was this diary," said Harry quickly, picking it up and showing it to Dumbledore. "Riddle wrote it in 16. Dumbledore took the diary from Harry and peered keenly down his long, crooked nose at its burned and soggy pages. "Brilliant," he said softly. "Of course he was probably the most brilliant student Hogwarts has ever seen." He turned around to the Weasleys, who were looking utterly bewildered. Very few people know that Lord Voldemort was once called Tom Riddle. I thought it myself 50 years ago at Hogwarts. He disappeared after leaving the school, traveled far and wide, sank so deeply into the dark arts, consulted with the very worst of our kind, underwent so many dangerous magical transformations that when he resurfaced as Lord Voldemort, his very recognized. Hardly anyone connected Lord Voldemort with the clever, handsome boy who had once had boy hair. "But Ginny," said Mrs. Weasley, "what's our Ginny got to do with him?" "He's the diary," Ginny sobbed. "I've been writing in it, and he's been writing back all year." "Ginny," said Mr. Weasley, flabbergasted, "haven't I taught you anything? What have I always told you? Never trust anything that can think for himself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Why didn't you show the diary to me or your mother? With a soft object like that, it was clearly for a dark magic." I didn't know," sobbed Ginny. "I found it inside one of the books Mom got me and thought someone had just left it there, forgotten about it." "Miss Weasley should go up to the hospital wing straight away," said Dumbledore, interrupted in a firm voice. "This has been a terrible order for her. There will be no punishment. Older and wiser wizards than she have been hoodwinked by Lord Voldemort." He strode over to the door and opened it. "Bed rest and perhaps a large steaming mug of hot chocolate. I always find that cheers me up," he added, twinkling kindly down at her. "You will find that Madame Pomfrey is still awake. She's just giving a mandrakes to I dare say the basilisk victims will be waking up any moment." "So Hermione's okay," said Ron brightly. "There's no lesson harm then," said Dumbledore. Mrs. Weasley led Ginny out, and Mr. Weasley followed, still looking deeply shaken. "You know, Minerva," said Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore said to McGonagall, "I think all this merits a good feast. I thought I asked you to go and let the kitchens." "Right," said Professor McGonagall crisply, also moving to the door. "I'll leave you to be these little Potter and Weasley, should I?" "Certainly," said Dumbledore. She left, and Harry and Ron gazed uncertainly at Dumbledore. What exactly had Professor McGonagall meant? Deal with them. Surely they weren't about to be punished. "I seem to remember telling you both about why I have to expel you if you broke any more school rules," said Dumbledore. Ron opened his mouth in horror. "Which goes to show that the best of us must sometimes eat our words," said Dumbledore and Ron, smiling. "You will both receive special awards for services to the school, and let me see. Yes, I think 200 points apiece for Gryffindor." Ron went as brightly pink as Lockhart's venom-tiled flowers and closed his mouth again. "But then one of us seems to be keeping mightily quiet about his part in the dangerous adventure," said Dumbledore added. "Why is it so modest, Gilderoy?" Harry gave a start. He had completely forgotten about Lockhart. He turned and saw that Lockhart was standing in the corner of the room, still wearing his vague smile. When Dumbledore addressed him, Lockhart looked around his shoulder to see who he was talking to. "Professor Dumbledore," Ron said quickly, "there was an accident down in the Chamber of Secrets. Professor Lockhart—" "Am I Professor?" said Lockhart in mild surprise. "Vanished! I expect I was hopeless, wasn't I?" He tried to do a memory charm, and the wand backfired, Ron explained quietly to Dumbledore. "Dear me," said Dumbledore, shaking his hand, his long silver moustache quivering. "Impaled upon your own sword, Gilderoy." "Sword?" said Lockhart dimly. "I haven't got a sword. That boy has, though. He pointed at Harry. He'll lend you one. Would you mind taking Professor Lockhart up to the coastal wing too? Dumbledore said to Ron. I'd like a few more words with Harry. Lockhart ambled out. Ron cast a curious look back at Dumbledore and Harry as he closed the door. Dumbledore crossed to one of the chairs by the fire. Sit down, Harry, he said, and Harry sat, feeling uncomfortably nervous. First of all, Harry, I want to thank you, said Dumbledore, eyes twinkling again. You must have shown me real loyalty down in the chamber. Nothing but that could have called false to you. He stroked at Phoenix, which fluttered down onto his knees. Harry grinned awkwardly as Dumbledore watched him. And so you met Tom Riddle, said Dumbledore thoughtfully. I imagine he's most interested in you. Suddenly, something there was nagging Harry tumbling out of his mouth. Professor Dumbledore, Riddle said, I'm like him. Strange likenesses, he said. Did he now? Said Dumbledore, looking thoughtfully under his thick silver eyebrows at Harry. And what do you think, Harry? I don't think I'm like him, said Harry, more loudly than he intended. I mean, I'm a Gryffindor. I'm... But he fell silent, a lurking doubt resurfacing in his mind. Professor, said Sergeant Gunn after a moment, the Sorting Hat told me I'd have done well in Slytherin. Everyone thought I was Slytherin's heir for a while, because I can speak Parseltongue. You can speak Parseltongue, Harry, said Dumbledore calmly, because Lord Voldemort, who is the last remaining descendant of Salazar Slytherin, can speak Parseltongue. And that's why much is mistaken. He transferred some of his own powers to you the night he gave you back Scar. Not something he intended to do, I'm sure. Voldemort put a bit of himself in me, Harry said, thunderstruck. It certainly seems so. So I should be in Slytherin, Harry said, looking desperately into Dumbledore's face. The Sorting Hat sees Slytherin's power in me, and it put you in Gryffindor, said Dumbledore calmly. Listen to me, Harry. You happen to have many qualities Salazar Slytherin prized in his hand-picked students. It's all very Radgift, Parseltongue, with his socialness, determination, a certain disregard for rules. He added, his moustache quivering again. Yet the Sorting Hat placed you in Gryffindor. You know why that was? Think. It only put me in Gryffindor, said Harry in a defeated voice. Because I asked not to go in Slytherin. Exactly, said Dumbledore, beaming once more, which makes you very different from Tom Riddle. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Harry sat motionless in his chair, stunned. If you want proof, Harry, that you belong in Gryffindor, I suggest you look more closely at this. Dumbledore reached across to Professor McGonagall's desk, picked up a blood-stained silver sword, and handed it to Harry. Dully, Harry turned it over, the rubies blazing in the firelight, and then he saw the name engraved just below the hilt. Godric Gryffindor. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Harry, said Dumbledore simply. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Then Dumbledore pulled open one of the drawers at Professor McGonagall's desk and took out a quill and a bottle of ink. What you need, Harry, is some food and sleep. I suggest you go down to the feast, while I'll rest to Azkaban. We need our gamekeeper back. And I must draft another vermis for the Daily Prophet, too, he added thoughtfully. We'll be reading a new Defense Against the Dark Arts, teacher. Dear me, we do seem to run through them, don't we? Harry got up and pressed to the door. He just reached the handle, however, when the door burst open so violently that it bounced back off the wall. Lucius Malfoy stood there, fury in his face, and cowering under his arm, heavily wrapped in bandages, was Dobby. Good evening, Lucius, said Dumbledore pleasantly. Mr. Malfoy almost knocked Harry over as he swept it onto the room. Dobby ran scurrying in after him, crouching at the end of his cloak, a look of abject terror on his face. So, said Lucius Malfoy, his cold eyes fixed on Dumbledore, you've come back. The governor suspended you, but you still sort of think you'd return to Hogwarts. Well, you see, said Dumbledore, smiling serenely. The other relieving governors contacted me today. It was something like being caught in the hailstorm of owls, to tell the truth. They'd heard that Arthur Weasley's daughter had been killed and wanted me back here at once. They seemed to think I was the best man from the job after all. Very strange tales they told me, too. Several of them seemed to think that you had threatened to curse their families if they didn't agree to suspend me in the first place. Mr. Malfoy went even paler than usual, but his eyes were still slits of fury. So, have you stopped the attacks yet? He sneered. Have you caught the culprit? We have, said Dumbledore with a smile. Well, said Mr. Malfoy sharply, who is it? The person was last time, Lucius, said Dumbledore, but this time Lord Voldemort was acting through somebody else by means of this diary. He held up the small black book with a large hole through the center, watching Mr. Malfoy closely. Harry, however, was watching Dobby. 내일이 드디어 해리포터 2권 영상 마지막입니다. 오늘도 재미있게 봐주셨다면 구독과 좋아요 꾹꾹 눌러주시고 다음 영상에서 만나요. 안녕!